Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty fundamental. Cancer. It's a word, we all hear, often with a lot of fear attached. But what is it actually?
It's a great question. And it's important to understand because, well, cancer isn't just one single disease. It's really a large family of
A
diseases.
family, okay.
Yeah. And the common thread, the thing that links them all, is that some of the body's cells start behaving abnormally. They grow out of control. And crucially, they have the potential to um, invade other tissues or spread.
Right, the spreading part. That sounds like the really dangerous bit.
Yeah.
But let's rewind a bit. I read something interesting about the word itself, cancer. Something about crabs.
That's right. It goes way back to ancient Greece, the word karkinos.
Hmm.
It meant crab, but also tumor. Apparently, physicians like Hippocrates thought some tumors with their, veins spreading out kind of look like a crab digging into the sand.
Huh, that's quite an image.
It is. And the Latin word for crab is cancer, which just stuck.
Okay, so we're talking about abnormal growths. But our bodies make new cells all the time, don't they? What's the normal way it works?
Exactly. Your body has trillions of cells, and normally their life cycle growing, dividing, doing their job, and eventually dying, it's all very tightly controlled
Controlled by what?
by the DNA inside each cell. Think of DNA as the instruction manual. It tells the cell exactly what to do and when, including when to stop growing and when it's time to die off. There's actually a name for that programmed cell death, apoptosis.
Apoptosis, okay. So where does cancer fit into this? What goes wrong with those instructions?
Cancer starts when that DNA gets damaged or changed. We call these changes mutations. These mutations mess up the instructions.
That doesn't up how?
They might tell a cell to divide when it shouldn't, or prevent it from dying when it's supposed to. So you get cells growing without the usual controls, ignoring the normal signals. Fundamentally, it's a disease driven by faults in our DNA.
And when these cells grow without control, they pile up, right?
Yeah.
That's what forms a tumor.
That's usually what happens, yes. They form a mass or lump. The medical terms are neoplasm or tumor.
But I've heard that term tumor used for things that aren't actually cancer.
Right.
That always confused me a bit.
You're right, and it's a really important distinction. Historically, tumor just meant any kind of swelling. Medically now, it means an abnormal mass of tissue from this uncontrolled growth. But the crucial thing is whether that tumor is benign or malignant.
Benign versus malignant.
Okay.
Let's break that down. What's the difference?
So benign tumors are not cancerous. They grow, sometimes quite large, but they tend to grow more slowly. And critically, they don't invade the tissues around them.
They stay put.
Exactly. They don't spread to other parts of the body. That process called metastasis doesn't happen with benign tumors. Think of things like common skin moles or uterine fibroids or certain types of polyps.
So generally less worrying.
Generally, yes. They can often be removed with surgery and they usually don't come back. However, even a benign tumor can cause serious problems depending on where it is.
How so?
Well, imagine a benign tumor growing inside your skull. It might not be cancer in the spreading sense, but it can press on vital parts of the brain and cause major issues.
Right, location matter.
It really does. And also, some benign growths, like certain polyps in the colon, are considered precancerous.
Precancerous, meaning they could turn into cancer later.
Precisely. They aren't cancer yet, but they have the potential to develop further mutations and become malignant over time. That's why doctors often remove them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if benign tumors stay put, then malignant tumors.
Yeah.
Those are the ones we actually call cancer.
Exactly. Malignant tumors are cancer. Their cells don't just grow uncontrollably. They can invade surrounding tissues, like roots spreading into soil. And most importantly, they can break away and travel to distant parts of the body.
Metastasis again.
Yes, metastasis. That ability to spread is really the hallmark of malignancy and what makes cancer so dangerous. It turns what might have been a local issue into a body-wide problem.
So cancer cells are kind of like rebels. They ignore the rules, they don't respect boundaries, and they try to colonize new places.
Mm-hmm.
What specifically goes wrong in their instruction manual, the DNA, to make them act like this?
It's usually a combination of things, not just one single fault. But broadly, the mutations do a few key things. First, they can act like sticking the accelerator pedal down.
Making the cells grow faster.
Much faster, yeah. They just multiply rapidly, creating more and more abnormal cells. Second, the mutations can disable the brakes.
The brakes.
Yeah, we have genes called tumor suppressor genes. Their job is normally to stop cell division if something's wrong or if growth isn't needed. Mutations can basically cut the brake lines so the cells just keep going even when they should stop.
Accelerator stuck on, brakes failed. What else?
The third big problem area is DNA repair. Our cells are constantly checking their DNA for errors and fixing them. Special genes manage this repair process. If you get a mutation in one of those repair genes, then the cell gets sloppy about fixing other mistakes. Errors start to accumulate much faster across the whole DNA.
So it's like the quality control system breaks down.
Exactly. And the thing is, it usually takes multiple hits, multiple mutations in these different types of genes for a normal cell to become fully cancerous. It's often a gradual process.
The step-by-step breakdown.
Sort of, yeah. We talk about tumor progression. You might start with some initial abnormal growth, maybe leading to a benign tumor, but then as more mutations occur, some cells might gain new abilities, like the ability to invade or survive better. It's almost like evolution happening within the tumor, selecting for the most aggressive cells. Eventually, this can lead to a malignant cancer.
And that ability to invade leads to metastasis. How exactly do the cells travel?
They can break off from the main tumor and get into the bloodstream or the lymphatic system.
A lymphatic system,
Right.
that's part of the immune system, right?
It is. It's a network of vessels throughout the body. So, cancer cells use these highways, the blood and lymph vessels, to travel to distant organs like the lungs, liver, brain, bones. And then they can settle down and start forming new tumors, secondary tumors.
And the symptoms would depend on where those secondary tumors end up.
Absolutely. Lung cancer spreading to the brain might cause headaches or seizures. If it spreads to the bones, it might cause pain.
It sounds like these tumors need resources to grow, especially if they're spreading.
They do. They need oxygen and nutrients. And tumors are quite cunning. They can actually trick the body into growing new blood vessels directly to them.
Really? They create their own supply lines.
Yes, the process is called angiogenesis. It's crucial for tumor growth beyond a very small size, and it also gives the cancer cells easier access to the bloodstream for metastasis. Blocking angiogenesis is actually a strategy used in some cancer treatments.
Fascinating, but also quite scary how adaptable these cells are. Now, you said cancer is a family of diseases. Does that mean there are different types based on where they start?
Yes, definitely. We classify cancers based on the type of cell they originally came from. The most common type by far is carcinoma.
Carcinoma, where do those start?
They arise from epithelial cells. These are the cells that line the surfaces of our body, both inside and out. So skin, the lining of the gut, the lungs, glands like the breast or prostate. Cancers in these places, breast cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, are mostly carcinomas. They make up maybe 80–90% of all cancers.
Okay, that's the majority. What are the other main types?
Well, you have sarcomas. These develop from connective tissues, things like bone, cartilage, fat, muscle, blood vessels. They're much rarer than carcinomas.
Sarcomas, connective tissue. Got it.
Then there are lymphomas and leukemias. These are cancers of the blood-forming cells. Leukemia generally affects the blood and bone marrow, leading to high numbers of abnormal blood cells. Lymphoma typically starts in the cells of the immune system, specifically lymphocytes, and often forms tumors in lymph nodes.
Blood and immune system cancers.
Okay. There are also germ cell tumors, which start in the cells that produce sperm or eggs, so they're most common in the testes or ovaries. And finally, blastomas, which are cancers that come from very immature embryonic type cells, usually found in children.
That covers a lot. What about brain and spinal cord cancers? Do they fit into those categories?
They're generally considered a separate category. They arise from the cells of the central nervous system itself, the brain and spinal cord. The most common types, called gliomas, start from glial cells, which are the supporting cells in the brain. And like other tumors, brain tumors can be benign or malignant.
Right. Okay, that gives us a much clearer map of the different types. Now, the really big question, why? Why does this happen to people? It often feels so random, so unfair.
It's the question everyone asks, isn't it? Why me? And the truth is, it's usually complex. Cancer is typically multifactorial.
Multifactorial, meaning lots of different things contribute.
Exactly. It's rarely just one single cause. It's usually an interplay between our genetics, our environment, and, frankly, sometimes just bad luck in terms of random mutations happening during cell division over our lifetime.
I've heard that our lifestyle choices and environment play a really big role, maybe more than genetics.
That seems to be the case, yes. Current estimates suggest that the vast majority, maybe 90–95% of cancers, are linked to genetic mutations caused by environmental and lifestyle factors.
Wow, that high.
It seems so. Only about 5–10% of cancers are thought to be primarily due to inherited genetic defects, meaning faulty genes passed down in families.
Okay, so let's talk about those environmental and lifestyle factors. What are the big ones we know about?
Well, tobacco use is unfortunately still a huge one. Smoking is linked to numerous cancers, not just lung cancer, and is responsible for a very large percentage of cancer deaths.
Right. Still number one.
Diet and obesity are also really significant. Being overweight or obese increases the risk for several cancers. And diet matters. Eating lots of processed foods, red meat, and not enough fruits, vegetables, and whole grains seems to increase risk. Maintaining a healthy weight and a balanced diet are key prevention strategies.
Okay, diet, weight, what else?
Alcohol intake. Drinking alcohol, especially heavily, is linked to cancers of the mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, colon, and breast. Certain infections also play a role, like HPV causing cervical cancer or hepatitis B and C increasing liver cancer risk. These are actually a big cause of cancer globally.
Infections, right, and radiation.
Yes. Ionizing radiation, like from radon gas that can accumulate in homes or from certain medical procedures like CT scans, can increase risk. And of course, non-ionizing radiation, specifically ultraviolet or UV radiation from the sun or tanning beds, is the main cause of skin cancer. That radon exposure, by the way, is thought to be almost as risky as secondhand smoke.
Wow, radon. I should probably check that. What else?
Lack of physical activity is another factor. Being sedentary isn't good. Environmental pollution, too, things like air pollution, secondhand smoke, exposure to certain chemicals in the workplace like asbestos or benzene, and even unsafe sex, because it can transmit cancer-causing infections like HPV.
That's quite a list of things we might be exposed to or have some control over. Now, what about the genetic side? You said 5–10%. If cancer runs in someone's family, how worried should they be?
It's definitely something to be aware of and discuss with your doctor. Having close relatives with certain types of cancer can mean you've inherited a gene mutation that makes you more susceptible.
Like the BRCA genes for breast and ovarian cancer.
Exactly. That's probably the best known example. Genetic testing is available for some of these known inherited mutations. But, and this is really important, inheriting a mutation doesn't mean you will get cancer. It just means your risk is higher than average. Many people with these mutations never develop cancer.
So it increases the odds, but doesn't guarantee it.
Precisely. Lifestyle factors still play a big role, even for people with inherited risks.
Are there other health conditions that can increase risk? Like chronic diseases?
Yes, definitely. Chronic inflammation seems to be a key link. Conditions involving long-term inflammation, like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, which are inflammatory bowel diseases, significantly increase the risk of colorectal cancer over time.
So managing those conditions is important for cancer prevention too.
Absolutely. Regular monitoring is often recommended.
Okay, let's tackle a couple of common beliefs. What about stress? Can being really stressed out cause cancer?
That's a really common question. The current scientific consensus is that psychological stress doesn't directly cause cancer to start. There's no strong evidence that stress itself damages DNA in a way that leads to the initial mutations.
But it feels like it could.
Well, severe stress can certainly affect the body in many ways, including the immune system. Some research suggests chronic stress might influence cancer progression or how well someone responds to treatment, but it's not seen as an initial trigger. It's a complex area still being studied.
Okay, so stress isn't a direct cause. What about physical injury? Like if you break a bone, could that spot turn cancerous later?
Generally, no. A single injury like a bump or a fracture isn't considered a cause of cancer. The idea might come from noticing a tumor after an injury, but usually the injury just draws attention to a tumor that was already there.
Ah, okay.
There are some very rare exceptions. Chronic, long-term irritation or inflammation from repeated injuries in the same spot might theoretically slightly increase the risk over many years because of the constant cell repair and division, and maybe prolonged application of heat. But for everyday injuries, no.
Good to clear that up. What about hormones? You hear about hormone-sensitive cancers.
Yes, hormones definitely play a role in certain cancers, particularly breast, prostate, ovarian, and uterine cancers. The body's own natural hormones, like estrogen, can fuel the growth of some cancer cells. Factors that influence hormone levels, like obesity or taking hormone replacement therapy, can affect risk. And conversely, some treatments work by blocking hormone production or action.
Right. And one last connection, autoimmune diseases. You mentioned inflammation earlier with IBD.
Yeah, there seems to be a link there, too. Conditions where the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues, like celiac disease or rheumatoid arthritis, are associated with a slightly increased risk of certain cancers, like lymphoma. Again, chronic inflammation is thought to be a potential contributing factor.
Okay, so it's a mix of genetics, environment, lifestyle, other health conditions, and maybe just chance mutations. It's complex.
It really is. There's rarely a single simple answer to why.
All right, this gives us a much better handle on the what and the why. Let's shift gears now to detection. How do doctors actually find cancer, especially early on?
Early detection is crucial because often the earlier cancer is found, the more treatable it is. The first sign might be something the person notices themselves, a new lump, persistent pain, unexplained weight loss, a change in bowel habits, a mole changing shape, or it might be picked up during routine screening.
Symptoms or screening. But those aren't a diagnosis, right?
No, absolutely not. Those are just clues that something needs investigating. The definitive diagnosis almost always requires a biopsy.
A biopsy, taking a tissue sample.
Exactly. A small piece of the suspicious tissue is removed and sent to a lab, where a pathologist, a doctor specializing in analyzing tissues, examines the cells under a microscope. They look for cancerous changes. That's the gold standard for diagnosis.
Okay, biopsy is key.
Yeah.
But before that, what tools do doctors use to investigate those symptoms or suspicious signs?
There's a range. It often starts with a thorough medical history and a physical exam. The doctor might feel for lumps, check lymph nodes, look at the skin.
Palpation, feeling for things.
Right. Then there's medical imaging, X-rays, CT scans, MRI scans, ultrasound, PET scans. These let doctors see inside the body to look for tumors or other abnormalities. Endoscopy is also common for some areas, using a thin tube with a camera, like a colonoscopy for the colon or bronchoscopy for the lungs.
Imaging and scopes. What about blood tests? Can they detect cancer?
Sometimes, but usually not definitively on their own for most cancers. Some blood tests can look for tumor markers, substances released by cancer cells or by the body in response to cancer. They can be helpful for monitoring cancer treatment or checking for recurrence, but they aren't usually specific enough for initial diagnosis or screening in the general population, though research is ongoing.
Okay, so screening, you mentioned that. What exactly is it?
Screening means testing people who don't have any symptoms, trying to find cancer at a very early stage, sometimes even before it's truly become invasive, like finding precancerous polyps during a colonoscopy.
Which sounds great. Why don't we screen for everything?
It's a balance. Screening tests need to be reasonably accurate. You don't want too many false positives, which cause anxiety and lead to unnecessary follow-up tests, or false negatives, which give false reassurance. Also, the test itself might have risks or be uncomfortable or expensive. And crucially, there has to be good evidence that finding cancer early through screening actually improves outcomes, leads to longer life or better quality of life compared to diagnosing it when symptoms appear.
So it's a complex calculation of benefits versus harms and costs.
Exactly. That's why screening recommendations vary. We have established screening programs for cancers like breast, mammograms, cervical, Pap tests, HPV tests, and colorectal colonoscopy stool tests, because the evidence shows the benefits outweigh the risks for certain age groups. For other cancers, like lung cancer, screening is recommended only for high-risk individuals, like long-term heavy smokers. And for many others, we just don't have effective screening tests yet.
And you mentioned universal versus selective screening earlier.
Right. Universal means offering it to a whole population group, like all women over 50 for mammograms. Selective means targeting those at higher risk, like the lung cancer screening example.
Okay, I've also heard about biomarker testing. Is that part of detection?
It can be, but it's often used more after a diagnosis. Biomarker testing looks for specific genes, proteins, or other molecules, the biomarkers in the cancer cells, or sometimes in blood or other fluids.
Why do that?
It helps doctors understand the specific characteristics of an individual's cancer. This can confirm the type of cancer, help predict how aggressive it might be, and crucially, guide treatment choices. For example, finding a specific mutation might mean a particular targeted therapy drug is likely to work. It's a big part of personalized or precision medicine.
Tailoring treatment to the specific cancer biology.
Exactly. And research is always pushing forward. You mentioned new detection methods. There's exciting work on things like liquid biopsies, trying to detect cancer DNA fragments in blood, or simpler tests like that urine test being developed for early prostate cancer detection.
Very hopeful developments. Okay, so we've covered what cancer is, the many factors that can cause it, and how it's generally detected. That's a lot of ground.
It is. Understanding these basics really helps frame the rest of the conversation about treatment and prevention.
Absolutely. So next time, let's briefly touch on the main treatment approaches, things like surgery, radiation, chemo, and the newer therapies.
Sounds good. We can give a quick overview of how they work and when they might be used.
And we should also talk about the progress in research, the importance of prevention, and importantly, wrap up with a sense of hope, because there has been real progress.
Definitely. We'll cover the main treatment pillars, touch on research directions like immunotherapy and precision medicine, and reinforce those key prevention messages.
Great. And we'll aim to leave everyone with a key takeaway and maybe something to think about regarding their own health.
Perfect. Looking forward to it.